In terms of the favourites for this year's tournament, PSG were so wonderful last year, and I just had a glance because I was like, who are the favourites for this year's tournament? And it was really striking. I don't want to mention odds necessarily because I know some people want to avoid that, and the problem gambling is a real thing, but it is useful just to illustrate the point. Liverpool, Arsenal, PSG, Barcelona, all locked on 6-1, followed closely by Real Madrid, Bayern, City, all within 9-1. So 7 teams under this blanket of between 6 and 9-1, and then a bit of a jump to Chelsea, and out we go. So I completely accept what you're saying about this distilling, this concentration of money at the top, and it's not good, certainly for a large portion of the season. But like for the 2025-26 edition, to have Liverpool, Arsenal, PSG, Barca, Real Madrid, Bayern, City, if they get things going, like 7 teams on a given night, I couldn't, anything could happen there. Do you have a strong favourite of that cohort, by the way?
So I do think I've covered them a fair bit. So maybe I am slightly conditioned by maybe just at the moment being in touch with more info from Arsenal. But I think one of the things they've done this summer that I think is going to prove a massive difference this season is their immense strength and depth. So basically, kind of Arteta got to some of those key games last season, and he's basically missing half of his best 11. Now, ironically, he's still missing half of his best 11 now, like the Forest game at the weekend, like Athletic on Tuesday. That hasn't had Saka, Odegaard, Saliba, Havertz. These are players in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Anytime Arsenal had an injury to one of them, it felt like there was this kind of, emotional crisis around the club. Now they're playing to the same level without even realizing it. So Arteta's specific response to last year, and it's a specific response to the fact that now, and this is another slight issue, I suppose, I have where the modern competition is, because this is not what the Champions League is supposed to be, but it is. It's essentially a parallel league campaign. So the biggest clubs are going to have to go the distance in 2 concurrent league programs. That is demanding a lot. I think that's one of the reasons why we initially saw some struggles at clubs like Man City and Paris Saint-Germain last year. But of course, the response of the super clubs, and you can see it in the way, even the way Liverpool have added Isak, say, to Mohamed Salah, when they don't strictly need him from a first 11 perspective right now. And why Arsenal have done this is they're just going to go out and boost their squads. And I think Arsenal have by far the deepest strength in Europe. You can see it in that squad, the number of options. And I think when it gets to especially November, January, when there are games every 3 days and you can't keep playing the same 11 all the time, and in the knock-on effect of that from February to April, I think that's when we're going to see the real virtue. And I think that way, that's why Arsenal might win the competition out of almost, I don't want to say attrition, but just by being able to weather all this more because suddenly they've got all these options.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And then who knows the extent to which that early consistency is rewarded. Like PSG timed their run beautifully, so poor. 15th, I think, going into the final round of games and then just got better and better and better.
But we've got another issue there, of course, which is, and this is related to what I just said about the parallel league campaigns, that for Paris Saint-Germain's league campaign,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily have to
Fair.
I mean, it's they're going to win the French league, and I think last season maybe they got a little bit struck by the fact that, like, okay, to be fair, Luis Enrique's ideas hadn't been as ingrained yet, but they weren't quite used to maybe as congested a season as they'd had, and once they adapted, so many of their players were fresh. So
Yeah.
that will probably have a massive effect as well.
Yeah. So, as you said, Arsenal and Bilbao, uh, competent. Madueke looks to be an excellent signing. They were without, I think, 7 key men. I read you mentioned some of them. It was Martinelli and Trossard, and Martinelli with the assist for Trossard's goal, who got the 2 goals. In rugby, they've started talking about finishers off the bench. Arteta is calling them impactors. So let's just all hope that doesn't
But
catch on.
finishers as well.
Finishers
Actually,
as well.
he did specifically say finishers
Did he?
after the game, and he's
Okay.
got this. So Arteta is part of. I actually went to an event he did 2 weeks ago with this group called. I've got it in front of me
Was
actually.
that with Steve Kerr?
Yeah, it was the
Ah,
leadership
yes.
playbook.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, with Steve Kerr, it was absolutely fascinating.
Was it? Because actually somebody sent it to me and said, this is really good. I have become like I get sick
Yeah.
and dizzy at the thought of another sport, what business can learn from it, leadership
This
thing.
wasn't
So
quite that.
okay,
I mean, obviously it's pitched to that, but it was essentially just two very interesting and high performing sporting figures. And obviously, you need to look at Steve Kerr's career,
yeah,
his life really, talking about their experiences more so. I mean, it was funny actually. Kerr he was brilliant at kind of anecdotes and talking about his lived experience and all this. Where with Arteta, you could sense a little bit that he'd come in with stuff he wanted to say, and he was really good at that.
right.
But when it was kind of when there was some open-ended questions, and there was a few Arsenal fans there who probably paid a bit to be there, and they were asking questions like one of them was about how you deal with difficult players, and there's an obvious answer there about Aubameyang, and Arteta sidestepped that. So yeah, whereas Kerr was talking about how Phil Jackson dealt with kind of Dennis Rodman and all this sort of thing. Um,
I must check it out.
yeah,
But
yeah.
sorry, impactors
But,
slash finishers.
but yeah, so as part of these groups that Arteta's involved in, I know for a fact he's kind of been speaking to people like Eddie Jones, who is obviously
Yeah,
big on the issue of finishers, Joe Schmidt as well. And yeah, I asked him after the game when he mentioned because he specifically used the phrase finishers can be as important as starters. And I asked him, well, have you got that from rugby? And he said, yeah, and I really like it. And this may be one of the interesting things about Arsenal season and the kind of the other side of having a really deep squad. Like I've been hearing stories that Arsenal squad is so big that players are having to use like areas of the training ground or patches of grass they didn't necessarily expect to. It's much more expanded. And there's an obvious challenge there in terms of how you keep players happy, and how you keep them content if they're not being picked. And I know like there's already been some not quite agitation, but players are wondering, well, I haven't played for 4 games in a row here. And one way you do that is, of course, is just emphasize that look, the game has changed. It's not about starting anymore. It's about coming on and being able to impact coming on. So once you, it sounds such a simple thing, but it is true basically because this is what and Martinelli and Trossard. I thought it was so symbolic that they were the two players that were decisive on Tuesday, and the way also they set each other up for both goals was so illustrative in this
yeah,
because
yeah,
they've almost been kind of Arsenal's two forgotten men a little bit as
yeah.
they kind of sign this cast of thousands.